Sup, YouTube and fellow Alaskans? Frontier Friendz here with a Frontier Tale. Gonna continue where we left off. If you recall, you watched our last video. We were talking about Final Fantasy and coming up, playing the game, and what we loved about it back then. And this time, coming back, we're gonna probably mention or foreshadow the decline of active turn-based combat systems and how it kind of just fell down. Don't get me wrong, you got your forever faithful that want to love it, but I mean, after some point, it's basically a game of rock, paper, scissors that's glorified. And if I'm correct, we were talking. Say what?
I said that was 10. 10 was just glorified rock, paper, scissors. I mean, it was still entertaining. You could swap people in and out. That was cool.
Yeah.
That was good. That was a good thing. But yeah, it was just kind of like, oh, and it was kind of too, it was like, there's a flying creature. Okay, get the flying guy in there. But
get Waka.
Get Waka in there. And I mean, it was good. I enjoyed it. I don't know. I mean, it was nice for me. You started getting the voice work in. Not always good, some of it bad, but it was they were moving in that direction to voice work. I didn't really care for Titus. As a main character, I just felt like he was kind of whiny. Personally, this is how I personally felt, kind of whiny. And then you find out he's a dream, and you're just like, I didn't really care to like you at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, he was definitely the whiner out of the protagonist, up throughout the years. I mean, he's confused. He's coming along, making friends.
Well, even the own game makes fun of him. You cried.
Yeah.
Like some of the spirit says that to him. You cried, and then runs off, and you're just like, all right, well, like, I guess this guy's kind of a wimp, as he's like, not so fast anymore, and you're just like, all right.
I feel like I'm playing a game of the Wonder Years, because of the narrator. I mean, it's just like, yeah, it was funny, and a little sad. It's just like, for goodness gracious, man, like this, tell the narrator to be quiet, man. Like this, so I mean, Final Fantasy X had its perks. I mean, it was the first Final Fantasy to go on PS2. We both got PlayStation 2s for that Christmas. We were rocking it out with that. We were having a blast playing Final Fantasy X, giving each other tips and advices and stuff. And it was okay. I mean, it was cool, but I mean, I don't know. In my opinion, it wasn't the most unliked one, but it was the one. It was easy to put it on the back shelf, and the reason following that is because of fan service, where they did a continuation of it called Final Fantasy X-2, which is just a bad idea. That was what was unique about the Final Fantasy series. You never did a continuation up until 10. 10 is the first one to do a continuation. You know what? Take that back. I just sat here and thought about it. That's not the first continuation, but it definitely was a proving point that continuations in these stories are blatantly pointless. As much as I would like a sequel to Tactics just to find out what happened, we didn't need to, because at the epilogue at the very end, it explained everything that happened. Mm-hmm. There's no need to keep going. So I was like, hey, respect. But we're talking about continuations. 10-2 basically takes off in the perspective of Yuna after whatever happened. And you find out that, you take it from this one. Like, I never played it. You played this
one. I think the redeeming quality of it is there was a whole garment grid, and it went to like jobs, but it just had it like she would put on different dresses and she'd get powers from them. And what worked was because it was like a job system, and that worked because it pulled on things of like, okay, she's this type, she's a dark mage, okay, she's a black knight, whatever, and she could do all these things based on that. It is all fan service. Her, you trying to find her musical people so she can like perform a concert, or or just the whole fact that these girls are getting dressed in these skimpy outfits, playing on that, it really just got lost into fan service. The story, really wasn't there. The characters, became so one-dimensional. It was all about fan service, even the dialogue. And basically I just gave up on it because I was like, okay, while the fighting is enjoyable, fan service is for me just taking it away.
Yeah,
10 at least there was a somber note. It was again going against organized religion. That was a hypocrisy. You had sin, which was cool. You're fighting not like necessarily a person, but this big giant creature that does feel like a big creature. That's cool. All right, I can dig that. And so you have to take him down piece by piece. I can dig that. That was cool. And then you're fighting your father. All right. Like there's elements I was like, okay, this is respectable. But at the same time too, they kind of destroyed their main character because he just felt like a little like kind of wimp, in terms of like, and it's okay to like show emotions and stuff like that, but it was just kind of like when the game is making fun of the character, how am I supposed to like this guy?
how much does respect this dude?
And I feel like too at that point I started branching off into like Kingdom Hearts, into Star Ocean, to the End of Time, and I really found like I'm more connected with those games. I mean, even though I had the same criticism with Kingdom Hearts, where it's like fan service,
Yeah,
I just like the combat system. So,
at least the combat, at least the fan service in Kingdom Hearts is more logical and more understandable if you think about it. You have a Square Enix game where they put in Disney characters. I mean, there's always these things in there that you see. You're like, okay, obviously he did that. That's for the fans, for Disney fans, and for Final Fantasy fans alike. You did these little cameos, you did these little cut scenes where they talk. I mean, the fan service in Kingdom Hearts is more justifiable than in any Final Fantasy game, unless it's like an Easter egg inside the primary game.
well,
I
yeah,
will not like you said, like you go to talking about the outfits in 10-2, and I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. Like makes no sense. I mean, Final Fantasy Tactic was hit twice by two spinoffs, and even one of those spinoffs had its own spinoff. And I'm just like, no, you need to leave that alone, unless it's going to be like a cameo side story. And even then, even till this day, recently, maybe about a year and a half ago, Final Fantasy Tactics made its return on Final Fantasy 14. I mean, you had to do this side quest where the Durai reports was brought back to the surface. The Saint of Jorah incident, where Ramza Beol fought, and you had to go back and find more story about him. And they do that, but organized religion being the antagonist in these games is definitely a high point. I mean, in Tactics, you had the Christ-like figure being executed and then being prophesized, and then it turns out the Christ-like figure turns out to be a rogue archangel. And I was just like, well, ain't that some shit? I'm like, how about that? The thing is, though, it was executed so well. I was like, damn, that is good. It's just good. I'm not like saying, I'm not so saying this or whatever. I'm just saying, like, the story was great, but the problem that I had was these spinoffs. You had Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, where they jump into a book, basically, if I'm correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's then you got that and the story was just weak. I'm just like, I don't have a problem with it. It's probably a good story. From what I saw, I'm just like, okay, I don't get it. Then you had Final Fantasy 12, something where they try. I feel like this was the Custer's last stand of active battle systems, where they tried to do it in live time, and then they try to do turn based, and I was like, you're gonna get your ass kicked. Like, you have no control over this. If you're getting whooped, you can run away. But no, it didn't work.
I just didn't find it fun. I just gave up halfway because I was like, I'm not having fun with this game. I don't feel any need to play it. But I think the difference, real quick, with going back to like fan service, I can take fan service if it's nostalgia. I get annoyed of it if it's fan service like for like sexual comedic elements. When it's just like, oh, your pervy old grandpa. I'm like, okay. Like after a while, when your whole game is based on that, like, oh, let's have these girls, dead or alive beach volleyball into a Final Fantasy game, annoys me after a while. I'm like, okay, I didn't sign up to play Dead or Alive beach volleyball with Yuna and the Final Fantasy, you know, girls. And so why are we having these dress spheres, becoming more and more revealing? That's kind of where I was just like, okay, this game is a joke. And I could handle, I guess, fan service when it was more like nostalgic on like Disney things. Then I was like, all right, I can play with this. You know, I felt like one of the takeaways with Final Fantasy for me, for Advance and for 12 was like, man, when you start getting these humanoid, non-human creatures as your partners, I don't know. I just kind of was like, when your main character was like a Mugol, and here I am like in, Tactics Advance, and it just seems like it was geared more for little kids when you
Yeah.
had that than adults, where the other ones where people were human, they looked like adults, and then you have these ones where it's just like a bunch of furry creatures hitting each other. Like that's what turned me off from it.
Yeah. It was this it dwindles out. I mean, it dwindles out. As a kid, you're like, man, that's boring, or it's whatever. I played it, it's cool. But no, when you become an adult, man, you're like, okay. I mean, if you look at it in an adult perspective, if you had known better, we're like, this is starting to get old, and I think they're just running out of ideas. They're jumping from active turn-based simulator to live action, like AOE style combat mixed with fast-paced combat. I
You don't
think
even have
Final
a main
Fantasy
character
14.
in 12. In 12, you don't even have a main character. In Ball of Fear, like comes in halfway or like, a third of the way in, and he's like more of a main character than your Vaughn or your other. It was like, okay, this is lazy. We'll go on to Final Fantasy 14, like you were talking about.
Oh no, you're right. Now that you brought that up, you said 12 didn't even have like a real main character. It had like a variant stories, like the stories of each different person. They like shared the protagonist rights. And Vaughn was supposed to be your Square Enix, the softy looking guy, pretty looking boy, had a damn vest on. He wants to be a sky pirate, and it's just, I don't know. A lot of these dudes, I don't know. Like none of the characters appealed to me. I mean, it was just soft, man. I'm like, bro, I'm just like, I mean, I don't know, man. Like I said, I think now I go back and look at it, I'm just wasn't impressed. It was just one of those games where I'm just like,
yeah,
it just dwindled off at that point. And I think some of the lore that's really good right now that's starting to resurface is coming from Final Fantasy 14. Each special side thing you want to do has a theme to it. I think the last one was Final Fantasy 8. The one before that was Final Fantasy Tactics, and so on before that, I think it was like some of the original Final Fantasy that showed up. I'm not sure if 7 made its appearance, but I can't be sure. But they definitely put Tactics on the map there. And I think at the end of the whole thing, when you're actually done with that whole thing, Rams will be off and everybody makes an appearance. I mean, anybody out there, you can look it up. Just type in Final Fantasy 14, Final Fantasy Tactics, side story, side quest ending, and it'll show. It's pretty cool. You see everybody there, everyone, and it's really cool. It's really nostalgic, really good thing. That's why I respect Final Fantasy 14.
We didn't even talk about
time
13 yet.
Man, you caught me. It's
I
almost
stopped
like
playing after 10. Yeah, I did a little 12, and then I just jumped to 15. But if you played 13, go for it.
I did not play 13. I watched it and I just said, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm sorry. I just said, man, at 13, I was worried. I was like, dude, I don't know. I think Final Fantasy it might just be time to go ahead and call a curtain call for it, man, because they're just lacking. They're lacking momentum. They're lacking getting people's attentions. Like it was, I mean, you had the girl who was basically, and they even like big level, like really big level, like gaming companies review this game. They said that is a female Cloud, and she's basically using Squall's weapon that's actually more dynamic. She had a gun sword. That's essentially who that was. And didn't 13 have a spinoff game too? 13 too?
Yeah, I think so. I just remember
Oh
thinking it
man,
was
like
very linear. I mean, I know 10 started that linear thing, and then 13 continued it. I think 12 tried to have a little open, but I think it was just linear still. It was only until we got 15 that things opened up again. And you had like a world, a sandbox world, which I felt like was
yeah. But
I,
15 was just such a nightmare. Like it wasn't a nightmare for the fans, it was a nightmare for the dev team. And they just wanted things. The producers wanted so much stuff. Even before 15 was 15, it was versus 13. And I'm like, what the hell is versus 13? I was like, dude, and I said it before it even happened. I said, just make it 15. We don't need to deal with anything interlocking with 13 because 13 just wasn't a good game. I'm sorry, it just wasn't good. I was watching reviews, I was watching game highlight reels on it. I'm just like, I'm not impressed with this. This is lame. You shouldn't tie nothing to this that brings in new characters because you're just gonna punish those new characters by
yeah,
bringing them into this. And then, like when you saw versus 13's trailer years ago, had that dude jumping around off the walls and teleporting and switching in between weapons. To this day, we know him as Noct, like Prince Noctis. But back then, he was Noctis. He was just different. You know about him. You just knew he was dangerous because he was killing people, like a lot of them.
yeah.
Give him his own. I mean, I don't know much of the Final Fantasy 15 story,
It was kind of
but
incomplete. I don't know. I mean,
that's another thing.
you had to go in doing research, and I feel like when you have to go into a game having read other things, I just feel like then it's like not enjoyable. Like I just want to go into a game, I want to have the story explain, make sense, but and it was already like only half a game because you had sandbox, it was fun, you're doing these quests, and then after a certain point, you use some time warp stuff. Again, they're warping time, which they make it work a little bit better, but then it just goes straight into linear story, and that was kind of to the end, and that was kind of it just felt rushed. It felt incomplete, and it just seemed like when I have to do research to understand a game, I think you might have some problems. But
And then breaking it down in episodes was just overkill. I'm like, okay, now at this point, you're just looking for money. And that brings it up to Final Fantasy 16. We don't know much about it. It looks like they're taking it a little old school. They got that one key protagonist that's somewhat of a badass. It looks like from what we see in the trailers, the guy's got two different parts of his life. I mean, one part where he's young, you got another part when he's grizzled and kind of a badass. Almost reminds me of Berserk. You had Guts when he's in his prime, then you have Guts when he's battle damaged, but he's still that much more hungrier. Like I said, I don't know much about him, but anybody out there wants to check the trailer out, go take a look. He has two different phases, unless it's two different people, but I don't think it is. I believe his name is Clive. I don't know. But people are like mad about. People are actually mad about that. His name is Clive. What kind of name is Clive? I'm like, I don't know. You have a problem with the guy who can do what he's doing in that trailer, and his name could be Stan. I don't care if he's doing it. He's whooping ass. It's all good with me. I don't care.
yeah,
But the toughest thing about the linear Final Fantasies that fall in line with the Roman numeral is character creation, and that's something that I like a lot with Final Fantasy 14. You basically become the protagonist. You make your own character, and I respect that on a high level.
I agree.
But that's just us up here in the north talking about how we feel about Final Fantasy and the decline. Thank you for watching. Please say something in the comments section. Tell us how you feel about it. Where did you feel if it was good or bad to stay with active time battle or turn-based systems or evolve? You think they should have stayed longer? Or do you have a problem with it or not? Or drop some lore facts on us on how you felt about organized religion in Final Fantasy.
Tell us
Thank
which
you for
one's your
watching the
favorite.
video. Say what?
I was gonna say, tell us which one is your favorite. That's always a
And
contention.
tell us why.
Yeah.
Tell us why. But thanks for watching our video. Be safe out there. Peace.
Later.